God, that was the anticipation. Hey, by the way, everybody, welcome back to another
700 a lot.
700 a lot. Are we getting close to 800 yet? No, we're early sevens, right? Okay.
I'm going to give a special thanks to Rosie, who came down. Rosie from John from KSCO. God bless her.
She's amazing. Yeah.
And we got what she wanted. She wanted vodka,
Yeah.
cranberry juice, fresh lime.
I was impressed.
And ice. Okay?
So, for those of you who don't know, Rosie is the morning host of is it Good Morning Santa
Good
Cruz?
Morning Monterey Bay.
Good Morning Monterey Bay. Yeah. And Rosie's been there forever, 32 years. Radio station's on its swan song, and she was so gracious, right?
Yep.
I give her credit because
She didn't throw anybody on the bus.
wow, I really thought.
We thought she was going to I thought the vodka was going to go.
Well, no, the opinions stayed in, the boobs came out. That was what happened. So, well done, Rosie, for sharing the family. But tonight,
He's back. Lots to talk about.
There is a lot.
A lot to talk about with we have notes.
What was the last time we had notes?
I don't remember. I think Jimmy maybe got notes.
I don't even think Panetta gets notes. Yeah.
Panetta wanted wine. He didn't want to look at the notes. Yeah. Anyway, we have notes tonight.
John Laird's back. John, thank you for coming back to the show.
My pleasure.
Hey, John, you're like the miracle worker in Sacramento. Because you get shit done really quickly. Right?
A lot happened this year. This was
happening,
really a good year, and I think of the 8 years and the two stretches I've been in the legislature, I don't think I was as tired or as busy as this one was, and yet I don't think we got enough. I ever did as much. It was productive, and there was even one time, I think it was the weekend before the last week of session, and we were in it. And so I was on the team that was negotiating all day on the climate bills, and at 5 o'clock the governor office said, well, we'll be negotiating tonight on Diablo Canyon. Who will be doing that? And the majority leader says, oh, the night shift is coming on. And I said, that's not fair. I was on the day shift. Because we just did all that till we tied down the deals and got them done at the end of session.
What's it like being up there and being in the trenches and getting involved and getting bills done and the day shift, the night shift? What's it like being in the trenches?
It's chaotic.
Is it friendly?
It's friendly, but there are moments. It's chaotic for the big things because there's so many interests. The governor, the assembly, the Senate, there's differences in the Senate, differences in the assembly. The governor has people arguing in his own staff. And then there's all the stakeholders outside that think, oh, this isn't going the right way. And with the climate thing, we had this 12-member climate working group, and I chaired it. We had 25 meetings, and the first 9 were every stakeholder in the universe. So we had the building trades unions and other unions and environmental justice groups and environmental groups. And then we had businesses, and we had local governments, energy providers. And then, because the 12 senators were of different political stripes from different areas in the state, it was really ethnically split, we then hashed it out. And so by the time we were in the end, we knew what we wanted to do, we knew what the facts were, but we were really trying to bring the governor along and the assembly along and get to where there'd be agreement and something he would sign.
So you're hashing out with people who are against you, right?
Some are.
Right?
Yes, and you see, the thing about it is if you go back 1 year, at the end of the session the year before, there was only one strong climate bill that died on the floor on the last day of session with just 14 votes that need 21 in the Senate. I tried. I was a supporter. And so that's when the Senate president said, this isn't going to happen again. And so we did that. We had our own 15 bills. I had the biggest one on different interim goals and really kickstarting what we're doing on climate. But the interesting thing was the governor parachuted in with about 3 weeks to go and said, I want these 4 big things, and I'm going to adopt John's bill as the 5th. And so we had all these bills of our own, my bill with his 4, and all the bills that he brought to the fore had died in previous years. He was supporting things that had not been passed.
Right.
And so I thought for a while, oh, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
And then we worked it through, and by the time one of them died in the Assembly, every single one got out of the Senate. And so, and that's what, this is completely separate. Thank God we got a half hour.
More than that.
Yeah,
We could
but
be here all night long.
But
Can you?
yeah, they're having strokes right now. The thing is, so this is climate, and then, you know, the governor wanted to keep Diablo Canyon open an extra few years, and that was a big thing. And then I was doing 19 bills, and then the Watsonville Hospital thing was going all year long. So it was an unbelievable, and I chaired the education budget subcommittee, and we had 15 hearings, and we had the best budget for education that we've had in modern times. So it was just like an intense year.
Wow. How do you keep everything you're working on separate? Are more things more important to you than other things, or
What's number one? Is there a number one?
Well, there never can be, because to me, the Watsonville Hospital thing went from the first day of session to the last day of session. And it was like, and there was always something that needed to move it to the next stage. And so,
Can you give, for people watching, because they may not know, we're talking about Watsonville Community Hospital that went from a private situation.
It was owned by a hedge fund.
Okay.
And it announced at the end of last year they were going bankrupt. And at first they were going to lay off all 600 people and close the hospital in a few weeks.
I thought the hospital was closed.
No, it wasn't, but that's what they were threatening to do.
Right.
And then it went to bankruptcy court. The minute it went to bankruptcy court, there was the option to buy it, and it kept it open for a few months in that. And so we came back in January, and I, in the jargon, gutted and amended a bill that I had on the assembly floor, amended in a hospital district for the Pajaro Valley, and 19 days later the governor signed it into law. Normally it takes 6 or 7 months. And for people that don't usually follow the process, I mean, normally if you set up a new district, you have this process, LAFCO, and you argue about the district with other cities, and it goes on for a year. I just took the school district boundaries, took Aptos out and dropped it in, and that became the hospital district boundary. And then, well, we have to elect people. Yeah, we do. We don't have time for that. So we'll set up 5 people, and we'll have the county board of supervisors appoint them till their elections. And then people said, we want studies. We want you to do studies. You add committees. It slows the bill down. It doesn't get there. So I'm like, okay, I'll do a second bill that does the studies.
Right.
I commit to doing that, but we have to move this bill.
Right.
And it just, I did what it takes to have it signed, and then the bill, the district was, 5 days old, and the bankruptcy court accepted its bid. And then we had 6 months to raise $65 million.
And where'd that come from?
It came, 40 million came locally, but Robert Rivas and I produced 25 million from the state. And when we did that, and that was sort of announced sometime around May or June, and there'd already been about 25 million raised, and so then we were within 15 or 17 million. And it, before I knew initially it was going to be 10 million that I was going to get through the Senate. He was going to get 10 million from the Assembly, be 20 million, and I sort of made this calculation that isn't quite enough. It's I got a few things pushed out, moved the Senate to 15 million, got 25, and then when we did that,
Are you shooting pool for that? Is that like a cue ball, like 8-ball quarter clock?
This was a very rich budget year, and so some legislators could get as much as 30 million for what they wanted, and so half of mine went to the Watsonville Hospital, and then I did a homeless shelter in Monterey, a transportation project in Monterey, a ranch, start a conservation easement on a 35,000 acre ranch, do land by the mouth of the Carmel River, save and rebuild the Veterans Hall in Cayucos.
No, you have great projects.
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah, so I was really trying to get all that done, and I had to shave and push some out, but to me, getting the Watsonville Hospital thing done was number one. And I was actually calling boards of supervisors because they were contributing, and others, and pushing people. And there were people that were really worried about it. Oh, I had drinks last night with the CEO of Watsonville Hospital, and he says, there's this one analogy you used that I've stolen, that I use, and it was, because people in January, I'm doing this bill, and I am moving it, and I get calls from some people, one in elected office, one that headed a major health institution. They said, we're really worried about the operations. We don't know if the operations will work. And I said, stop, this is like a hurdle race. The first hurdle is me getting this bill.
Yeah.
The second hurdle is getting the bid accepted.
Yeah.
The third hurdle is raising the money. You're arguing about the fourth hurdle. Let us do these 3 hurdles and we will
Right.
get there. And
Right.
I trust me.
Right.
I will work to make sure you're in this.
What's
in a way.
Watsonville without a hospital, though? That's I mean,
They would have to go 20, 25 miles either way.
Monterey.
You know the rush hours.
Right.
I mean, they'd have
Well-
to go into Salinas or they'd have to go to Dominican.
Right.
If it was certain hours of the day.
Yeah.
You know what that would mean for emergency.
well, I just want to say I race at Ocean Speedway in Watsonville, and I've seen over the 15 years I've been doing it, many ambulances leave with race car drivers having injuries, and thank you. Because
Well,
for
it's
me,
also-
I mean, it's a needed necessity of the community. But thank you, just from a little part of me that I'm out there risking my life. Maybe I don't know.
Well,
but
you're
it's-
risking injury.
Possibly,
and,
right, you
And
know,
the
it's-
thing is that when you look at that valley and who lives in it, I mean, it is a disadvantaged community. And I was trying to, you're in front of these legislative hearings, and you say things and people sort of glaze, like disadvantage, okay. But I said, here's the percentage of reduced and free school meals, which is an index of disadvantage, something like 80% in that district. Here's the percentage of English language learners. Here's the percent that have housing insecurity there. This is a picture of this community, and without a hospital, all those things are worse.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, that was
Yeah. Congrats.
and the one.
Congrats.
Well, yeah, and the one thing I think I was mentioning to you beforehand is that our last day of session was 14 or 16 hours. It's this marathon session, and I'm sitting on the floor, and we're doing these last bills, and we're doing Diablo Canyon at 1:30 in the morning as the last thing. And I get this text from here, and it is a copy of the transfer of the hospital, that it has been formally transferred on that last day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, yes, yes, this is like, it has happened.
Because that was a real personal project for you, right?
It
I mean,
was, and I don't think I knew how personal it would be, and it was one of those things that it wasn't just, I'm not just doing a bill, I'm calling people about money. I'm calling them to get them involved. I had to call a couple of people and say, without saying too much to indicate who they are, do your job. Come on here. We need you. This is really, it was a team effort, and there were some people that were sort of for it and were in certain positions of influence and weren't doing much.
Do you think that's going to be your legacy when you're down the road, retired, you're sitting on Kauai, you're sitting out there on Kauai?
Kauai?
looking
Is that
back?
spot?
Is that your legacy to Watsonville
It
Hospital?
might be one of them, but
Yeah.
it's like, to me, it is one, and it's an incredible personal
course.
satisfaction,
Well,
because
people-
you take, as I was saying beforehand, you take just every skill you have,
Right.
and you put it towards
Right.
something that
Right.
makes a real difference.
All the people that work there, all the people in the community that need that hospital, what a relief.
I was there yesterday because they're taping a documentary.
On you?
No, on the
On the
hospital
hospital?
saving,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they interviewed me for it,
Yeah.
and people were walking up in the hallway that I didn't know, and just going,
Yeah.
"Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you." And,
Yeah.
and there were also these really funny moments. The Wall Street Journal was covering it for a while because they had this reporter that was focusing on small hospitals in rural communities that were failing in the current environment, and there were 2 others he talked about, like in Kansas and somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, and so he was following Watsonville. And when I said that I had to gut and amend a bill, what it means is I had a bill on the assembly floor that I could have moved to the governor from the last session. It was sitting there at the beginning, and it was on sea level rise, which I'm passionate about, and I ended up redoing it, but I needed a bill. That was most of the way there, and so at some point I thought, well, start that bill over, but I need that bill. So I take that bill and I put the hospital district in it, because then I just have to have the Senate agree and it goes to the governor and you don't have the same amount of hearings and you figure it out. And this Wall Street Journal reporter, he's interviewing me and he says, let me get this right. You were the former Secretary for Natural Resources. You headed the state's oceans program. You're like one of the leading enviros in the legislature, and you threw away a sea level rise bill. And I said, exactly. That tells you how important this hospital was.
Right.
Wow.
Because I and I ended up reintroducing it and moving it through. But the thing is that's just what it was, and you sort of.
That's how important it was.
Yeah, and in the moment, you use whatever tool you have at your disposal.
Wow.
You know.
Congrats. Seriously, it's
So
amazing.
you got the kitchen sink.
It's true.
Right?
And the thing about it is, given your applause just now, we never knew. There were times when I think, I'm not sure we're going to do this. But as I said when we all celebrated at the end, failure was not an option.
Right.
But we never knew for sure that we were going to be able to do this.
Right.
There was at that time when we were 15
What
million
was the
short.
biggest? What was that biggest total that you faced?
I think it was raising the money in the second half.
Yeah.
Because the first money was the easiest money.
Yeah.
The Board of Supervisors came. We convinced the Monterey Board of Supervisors to put in $3 million because the district goes into Pajaro.
Yeah,
and it deals
Right.
in Monterey County. The Central Coast Health Alliance put money in. The Pajaro Health Trust. The one that was interesting is Kaiser Hospital. And, they're new to Santa Cruz, and they're building outpatient clinics. And you can't be a physician in the outpatient clinic unless you have privileges at a hospital. And for certain reasons, a lot of them don't have privileges at Dominican. So they have privileges at Watsonville. And if Watsonville Hospital went down, Kaiser would go down in the county. So that was a point of leverage on Kaiser. It's like, come on.
Right.
And so they gave money in the beginning, and then they gave money right at the end to close it.
Yeah.
Wow. I was going to ask about Gavin Newsom, because you've talked to a lot about him in the show so far. Is there something that we don't know about Gavin Newsom that maybe somebody watching would be surprised about in your dealings with him?
Not really, because a lot of what you see is what you get. The one thing is sometimes he's really into the headlines, and some of us have to do the grunt work and make sure that the thing that leads to the headlines are done. And he's really doing this interesting thing now, where once again, I don't know how it's going to come out. He's attacking the oil companies for making big profits in the gas crisis. And at first he wanted a windfall profits tax. And I was like, really? We have 40 new legislators out of 120. We have one of the biggest turnovers. The first thing you're going to do is make them vote on a tax? Really? You think that's going to work? And so it has morphed into some kind of penalty. So I think it's now a majority rather than 2/3, and it's a penalty, and nobody's using the word tax. And so I think he has responded. But it's interesting to me how much he pushes it. About every day he has a press release on the level of the profits that are happening in that. And I have no idea how that one's going to turn out.
Well, it's interesting, that statement of, oil companies having record profits right now. And one person's getting blamed for high gas prices right now, and so that's a really interesting time to be on the
position.
Yeah,
and
right?
the oil companies came in a few of the legislative races big time, and some they won and some they didn't. And there was an interesting one where the more moderate candidate for the Senate won in Sacramento, and now she's my seatmate. She was on the city council in Sacramento, and the oil companies put $2 million in for her. And she, I don't know what the word is, denounced the contribution. I mean, they did it independent expenditure, so if you're the candidate, you have no control over it. And she said, I didn't ask for this, I don't want it, I'm not tied to the oil companies. But I think they were, I served, it was Dave Jones was their opponent, who was the state insurance commissioner, who I served with in the assembly. I think they were as much scared of him being in there than wanting her.
Wow.
And yet she was sort of repudiated. So now it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
What does she do on the windfall profits thing after getting all this oil money and sort of repudiate? So it's going to be very interesting to see.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, although she already repudiated the hand that
Yeah,
fed her.
yeah.
So we're going to see.
This year, how many legislative bills did you work on? Did you work on about?
You mean last year? Or in the session that just ended?
Yeah.
I think I had 23 or 24, and I got 20 to the governor's desk.
Wow.
Yeah, and he signed
Once you get to the governor's desk, is that almost a lock that it's gonna pass?
No.
50-50?
Oh, it's better than even.
Right.
I think this year he vetoed 14% and signed 86, and he did this thing at the end that was painful, where he just decided, oh, it's going to be a poor year next year. Any of these that have money, I'm just vetoing.
Oh.
And it was really across the board, and it wasn't on merit, and it was, I hate, Schwarzenegger did that once, where it's like, oh, none of these bills rise to the level of being concerned, and just vetoed hundreds of bills, and it's like,
Without even reading them?
oh, reading, but not taking into account the serious policy that some of them
Right.
are. I consider myself a serious legislator. I mean, I'm not frittering around. I'm not doing something to get a headline. I'm trying to get things done. And so it irritates me when there's that kind of stuff. You know, although I can't complain. He signed 19 out of 20.
Well, and is
bills.
that like, do you
Yeah.
do you get the biggest trophy this year? Is there somebody
I
who
don't
beat
know
you?
if there's somebody that got more, but I'm right up there.
So you're the
I got
El
a lot.
Jefe, El Jefe.
He gets a skateboard.
Well, but it depends, because some of them were big.
Right?
You know, I did one that flew under the radar that I'm really pleased with, and that is here in Santa Cruz, we have mobile home rent control. And it's different than sort of residential rent control, because if you have a mobile home, you don't own the land underneath. And if somebody wants to quadruple what they're charging you, you're a hostage. You can't really move. Mobile homes aren't as mobile as the name.
No, those axles are rusted right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is that there was a law passed in 1992 that said, we're worried about new mobile home parks being built, so we're going to exempt any mobile home space or park built after 1992 from rent control. Well, now it's 30 years later. They have recovered their costs, and that's kind of a loophole. So I did a bill, and it came to a compromise that reinstitutes that after 15 years of recovering your costs for new space or new mobile home, it automatically goes under the local rent control law, if there is one.
Yeah.
And so it's bringing a few 100,000 people back into mobile home rent control that were out, and gives the owners the chance to recover their costs. So it's, and that just flew under the radar. This just got no notice, and the business groups that are active opposed it at first, and then I compromised with some of them, and then we got it there.
Can we talk about windmills?
Sure.
So we have a
Oh, that's right. This is the recent.
we auctioned off leases of, I guess, water to anchor windmills off the coast.
And the irony is it's not totally anchoring. They're going to be floating.
They're floating.
Although the cable that will
cables
take the
go down
energy
to-
will be anchored.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So but we had yesterday was the
Yes,
auction.
yes.
So yesterday we had an auction,
Federal auction.
federal auction for land leases offshore to plant windmills that will generate, I heard, over 1 million homes. Is that correct?
At least.
Yes.
And they were leased in two places yesterday, and that's where they're being targeted initially in California, off of Humboldt County, which is Eureka, Arcata,
Right.
up there, and off of San Luis Obispo County, sort of off of Cambria and Morro Bay. And they're out there, you know, state waters or whatever they are, 12 miles, and these are in federal waters. And so they've leased, and there's consortia. I found this out when I visited the windmills in Scotland a year ago, that it's not one company that does each one. It'll be a mix of companies.
Yes.
And now Portugal, Scotland, Norway, off of Denmark, some off the East Coast. They're really taking off on the offshore, and we're behind. And it factored into Diablo Canyon, because the governor wanted Diablo Canyon, which is scheduled to close in 2025. He wanted to extend it 10 years.
This is the nuclear power.
Is it
Yeah,
timed out? Is it more? Is it
Well, that's
wearing out?
no. There's,
Earthquake fault.
Yeah, there's seismic issues and there's deferred maintenance issues, and that was part of the bill on that. But the thing about it is that we worked to get it back to 5-year extension, so that, because the key thing for the wind is having the electricity transmission to take the power when it comes in off the shore. Right. And so if Diablo Canyon scales down in 2029 and 2030, that's right when the wind is coming on, and you can take all the transmission that is built to move the power out of Diablo Canyon and use it to move the power of the offshore wind.
Right.
And then there's this complicating issue in the north, which is there is no adequate transmission off of Humboldt. So they have something like 6 or 7 years to figure out how they're going to build transmission and be able to move that power on the grid, because it's way to the side of the universe.
Because it has to go to Sacramento or the Bay Area or
Bakersfield,
Idaho or somewhere else, right?
Yeah, well, we're tied in a Western grid in a way that it can go back and forth. And it's interesting because when Texas had their meltdown a year ago, when Ted Cruz went to Cancun,
of course. Ted Coon.
Yeah. What happened is they were really smug. They were like, we're not connecting with any other state. And the only place in Texas that's connected outside is, I think, El Paso and a little bit in the Panhandle. Other than that, they're unique. So when they go down, they had nothing to draw on, and they didn't do insulation in their wind turbines. And so here's Iowa, where it's 20 or 30 degrees colder, and the wind turbines are working just fine, but they didn't in Texas. And so here, we are tied in a Western grid, and they're still working some of it out. But if there's wind in Wyoming when we're having a heat wave and things are weird here, there's a chance to bring it in. But what we discovered, maybe it was in part of that September time, is if it turns out there's a heat wave that hits everywhere at the same time, you're not in as good a shape because you can't balance out some of the resources.
Well, climate change that's like your number one. Could that be your number one?
Yeah, it is, because it should be everybody's number one.
It's not, but I know it's yours.
What was the climate change summit in Egypt?
It's called the COP, the Council of Parties, the United Nations. It's virtually every country in the world. And it I went, and it sort of goes on 2 levels. There's this upper level of the big people that try to negotiate between the countries. And they came...
Negotiate what, may I ask?
Well, originally, in the earlier ones, it's negotiating that everybody will reduce their emissions over time and how they're going to do it. But then there's all these other issues, and this year it was sort of not pain, it's a loss, and it's basically the issue of the fact that it's the industrial countries almost entirely north of the equator that have caused the problems. And a lot of the developing countries south of the equator did not contribute to the emissions in the history of this dramatically, and yet they're bearing the brunt. And so they want the industrial nations to help them cope with the results. I mean, for example, the snow on Mount Kilimanjaro is shrinking and shrinking, and they depend on the water on different sides, and they're island nations in the South Pacific and over in the Indian Ocean that could cease to exist.
Right.
And so they're like, you guys did this, you got to help us. And so this year there was finally agreement on making some appropriations to try to help the countries that need help.
Should they be stepping on the gas all of a sudden? It seems like now with the climate change, it seems like we got to a point where we kind of like, instead of moving along slowly, we need to kind of like get it out, put the handbrake. Put the handbrake down.
Because we're crossing over the percentages where some of the impacts are catastrophic. Right. And I led a delegation of senators to Vancouver and Victoria in July. And I don't know where I was last year in their heat dome. I was reading about their heat dome, but there's this little small town, I'm blanking on the name, that's about an hour and a half north of Vancouver. It's a railroad town. There's about 300 people. And it just literally exploded and burned down in a minute in the middle of that heat dome, and it's like a mini paradise. And so those kinds of impacts, and when we're talking to the people in the provincial government, they you know, hydroelectric power is their main source, but if all of a sudden water is down and other stuff, then their power is challenged, and their forests are challenged, and they have fires, and so there's all these issues they're facing that are not unlike some of the ones that we're facing in different ways.
It's crazy because you think of like Paradise Fire. Tomorrow that's Vancouver's fire, you know, because as we warm up, we're going to move north.
Yes, I mean, there was a time, there was an article 2 or 3 years ago that said that Santa Cruz County's was going to be the new San Diego weather-wise, and I love San Diego, but I live here because this is what this is, you know, and those kind of changes
are dramatic.
Yeah, they really are, and they're dramatic in so many different ways.
It's kind of a joke I say is that climate change has been good for Santa Cruz tourism because it's sunny every day. Like the June gloom.
Oh no, that was just a discussion somewhere where I was, because if you looked at what happened in those 10 days of the heat wave, hundreds of thousands of people in California moved to the coast.
Absolutely.
The visitor serving industry was over.
No, I get it. Good. That's my joke, is that it makes everyone flee from their towns and come out here thinking they're going to cool off. That's not the answer, right?
Right.
At all.
The answer is addressing the root problem.
Exactly, yeah. Today, I bought a hybrid car today.
Cool.
Yeah. I just
I have one, and we're putting solar on, and I'm trying to look at how we will run a thing to be able to have a place to plug it in the driveway. And my spouse is like, "We don't have an electric car," and it's like, well, A, we're going to at some point.
Yeah,
and
not
B,
yet.
People are going to want to visit us. You know.
How do you juggle what? Being state senator, I mean, talking about going to Egypt, and you're dealing with all these things that are far.
He's kind of a big wig.
Well, he is. I mean, you are. Like, I think you're the conductor, and a lot of people the band up. And I think I'm going to name you the conductor, right? But how do you deal with our town's problems, or Monterey's problems, or our small problems? Because we're a small town with big city problems.
No, exactly, and there's lots of ways where I want to help. Or I want to be involved today.
Is that for is that for the people underneath you, or is it something you take initiative?
Oh no, it's something I do.
Okay.
And you know, when you have the staff, I have 16 staff members that are spread out all over. They have to have their ear to the ground where they are. Some of them in Sacramento have to help me with agencies, maybe produce money or decisions or get stuff done. This morning I did a Zoom. Geez, it went for an hour and a half with the top staff
Shut the show down too soon.
of the Coastal Commission.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, here are all these issues. You're slowing down approving railroad tracks into Monterey, and we've got the Diablo Canyon, and you potentially going to help us preserve the lands, and how are your things going with saving the beach at Oceana Dunes? And I just started, there's an affordable housing issue, and how do you get into that with what you do, and Big Sur's doing a new plan.
Water a subject of affordable housing? Or just
always, although, excuse me, always for me.
Yeah.
But it's like a colleague of mine that is one of the leading housing people. He came to a part of the district when I was running. He said, I'm tired of hearing that infrastructure is a problem. If you build the housing, everything will follow. And it's a good friend of mine, but he happens to be from San Francisco. And I said, you get all the Hetchy water.
Right.
On the Central Coast, we do not import water. I'm sorry. Monterey has a water order. They don't have enough water for the people that are there right now. And yet they need a lot of affordable housing. And so water is tied to housing.
To housing.
Right. So much of your realm is reservoir based as well, and wells that are being depleted. Yeah. I forget you go so far south.
I go to the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara County.
I mean, we just talked about Oceana because I have friends who are like, they're like bearing arms over Oceana right now. They're so upset with what's going on down there. But that's a crazy. You are all the way. How many miles of the coastline do you deal with? Do you know? Because couple hundred miles.
Yeah,
probably?
I was going to say it's about 200, and it's I have 21 cities, and it's going to change in redistricting in 2 years. I'm going to lose the Santa Clara part, and I'm going to gain all of Monterey County, so I'll have Salinas and the Salinas Valley, and I'm going to gain San Benito, which is Hollister, Santa.
And you got how many years you have left? 2 years in your tenure?
6.
Six. Oh,
2
6
in my
years.
term, and I can run for another 4 years.
Are you gonna run for another 4 years?
I'm not announcing it here, but
Okay, no,
I
so
bet
you-
you'll see me
Hell
on the
yeah, he
ballot.
announced it.
I
What's
bet
going-
you'll see me on the ballot in 2 years.
Whatever.
Yeah.
He announced it right here on the show. All right.
I came right out. I came
Yeah.
right out.
I'm not announcing it right now,
Yeah,
but
you'll see me on the ballot.
yeah, and good. I
no,
feel you're here for the right reasons, John. And that I just
Well-
if you're watching, this isn't. You're not getting rich doing this, right? Is this like? Are you?
No, I'm collecting a couple of retirements and my salary, and it's making it work. We're just building my spouse should be negotiating for all of you.
Bring him in.
He's getting an art studio out of this, you
John, you
know.
have the energy to do this. It shows that you have the energy to do it.
Yeah.
And you need and to push things along. I mean,
Well, it
Maybe-
gives you
yeah.
energy. People say, "What drives you?" And it's like you get something done, and you feel
Right.
like. I mean
That-
doing the Watsonville Hospital thing. Okay, bring it on.
Well, that's
let's
huge.
go,
We had
you
Gail
know?
Newell here, and what'd she say? There's not enough beds because there's not enough nurses because we don't have the facilities to create both of those. You saved
yeah,
a giant part of our puzzle
right.
for human safety in this county. Congrats.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
Okay,
That's huge.
Here we go. You ready?
I'm ready. What are you doing?
Homelessness.
Ah. Is there an answer? You got an answer for that?
We have beaten that. We've beaten that.
Yeah.
No, it's just all of the above.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, it's interesting because I would say that in the time we were out of session, I went and visited almost any place that they're doing homeless services in the district. I went to the place that people park in Morgan Hill. I went to the homeless shelter in Salinas. I got money for the one they're building in Monterey. I went to the one in Seaside. I went to the tiny homes in Grover Beach. I went to the Motel 6 they're converting in Paso Robles. They have a great center in Atascadero. They have a comprehensive one in San Luis Obispo. And it's sort of like everybody's doing different things because it's what works for their community. And I just met with the Santa Cruz people because last year, the big budget ask that Mark Stone and I did was to get Santa Cruz money for homelessness. And so when they just closed the San Lorenzo Park camp, one of the things was is they used that money to where they're providing temporary shelter at the Armory, and they were able to meet with every single person in the campground and offer them housing. And
How many people? How
I
many
think between a third and 40% said yes, but then you can't sue. Normally, they have a right to keep going with the campground if they can't be offered other housing. They were all offered housing,
Right.
and so there wasn't a single legal action against closing that campground.
Wow.
And so there are these things going on, and they're trying to build, I'm not going to get the number right, an 118-unit low-income housing facility at Housing Matters at River Street and Highway 1 in Santa Cruz, and it's $44 million. Mark Stone got them 8. They've got grants for about $20 million more, and we really need about 5 of those in some form in the county. You really need housing at the, because the real trouble of the construction of housing is we're doing okay at constructing market rate housing. A lot of people can't afford market rate housing. It's like, how about that strata of affordable and low income? And it's hard because it's hard for a developer to pencil it out and get the money. And so that's where the state needs to
Yes.
work with people.
Especially here in Santa Cruz.
Yes.
We're number one of the highest square foot per dollar in the country, maybe. And that's really tough. I know back there's a development they're trying to do, and the property owner says it doesn't pencil out with what they allow me to build. It's tough in this county.
No, this ADU we're building was not cheap.
And ADUs, what did I say earlier?
Yeah.
I honestly think the future of housing in our county is ADUs and making it affordable and easy to obtain for property owners. Because those are normally younger, single, growing, working, stay in the community, contribute, future tax contributors that don't have a bed.
Yes.
Because all these houses in Pleasure Point
And
right here,
the school measure that passed for the Santa Cruz School District included, I think it was 180 units of affordable housing for teachers and school employees, and I think that's going to be on the former natural bridges.
and the state's requiring that now for cities.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about that because the state's requiring it without giving people the resources for the most affordable housing. And
Or
I
knowing
think-
how much dirt's available
Yeah,
in
there's
their
going to
town.
be a conflict when people can't deliver.
Right.
Because, and right now, Gavin Newsom's position is then he wants to enforce against the cities and the counties as if they have the option to do it, and I don't think that's going to be fair over time.
And I think those cities and
Yeah.
counties are terrified of that
Yes.
because they don't have the whereabouts to create
Well, he
this.
wants them to, this is not as negative as it's going to sound, he wants them to be terrified about it because he wants them to do whatever they can on affordable housing.
Right.
You know, but then there is going to be a place where people of goodwill are not going to be able to do
Yeah, it's
some of
tough. Yeah. Your job's not easy.
it. No.
Yeah.
Do you think you have improved your constituents since you started?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things, but just given that comment, there's so much to do and there's so much that's needed.
Right.
You know, you bite off what you can do and go for it.
Yeah.
So trying to help with the Santa Cruz end of the county get way ahead of the homelessness, trying to do Watsonville Hospital.
Well, and
You know.
all the way down to Oceana Dunes.
Yes, and we have big water issues on the Monterey Peninsula, and I sort of helped them this year in the budget with an emergency recharge well to put more water recycling in and out, which is a drought project, but good
Right.
over time.
Nacimiento's empty.
And I got
Yes.
them valves at the bottom because they can't access the so-called dead pools that are below the things, and those valves are long broken, so 6.9 million to those two dams to fix the valves at the bottom.
Yay.
You know, so
Oh.
yeah, you just plug away, and I finally got smart enough that, yeah, you get a certain amount that they might allow you to do, and I jammed the water ones into the water budget and the Cayucos Veterans Hall into the parks budget, and the one in the education budget is that the Cal Poly facility in Swanton that burnt in the CZU fire, they were $22 million short of rebuilding everything after you got the money from FEMA and after you got the insurance money. So I got $22 million in the education budget to completely rebuild the Swanton thing for Cal Poly.
So we complimented Rosie.
Okay, clap again. John Laird, for everybody.
We
Congrats.
complimented Rosie at the beginning of the show, but I wanted to just to compliment your take on what Mark Stone did, and we both attended his retirement party the other day. But you obviously know him better than me, obviously, and you tell a little bit about what he did and.
Well, the thing about Mark that's really interesting is there's this cliche in politics that, you know, you're a workhorse and not a show horse. And Mark was a workhorse. And you and I attended the event, and they had him on the stage when all of us spoke, and he was mortified.
Yeah.
I think he'd have rather been sitting around the fire doing anything else.
Yeah, he didn't like.
You know.
He was squirming.
Yeah, and you know, and yet there were really heartfelt tributes. He, when he started, I think he was chair of Health and Human Services, and he really took foster kids as his issue and did a lot. He was chair of the Judiciary Committee, which normally only attorneys know about, but it includes consumer protection, civil rights, as well as legal processes and things. And he was just stellar because a lot of times people get into the interest groups and they forget why they came there, and that was never an issue with him.
Right.
And so, and I joked in my comments because he was one of the first people that asked me to run for the Senate. He said, "We'll be a great team. I'm really looking forward to it." You and I just sync. And then I'm there 2 years and he bails. And I really teased him about it. But
was that an influence for you to do this?
Well, it helped.
Yeah.
It helped, and knowing that he was there, and you could just program. And you see, the example I used at his thing is, I had this bill last year that was really a tough bill. Another one sort of under the radar that was big, and that is that California is one of 5 states where if you have pain and suffering due to somebody else's negligence, you sue them, but if you die, those rights die. Your family might still have negligence claims and civil action, but you don't get the pain and suffering claims. And so then COVID is happening and courts are slowing down and people are waiting out people that are dying and losing this. And so I did a bill that said pain and suffering benefits do not die with the person that it happened to. And it was a really hard, I mean, we're one of 5 states. We did it for 60 years. There's certain interests that really benefited by that. So I get it out of the Senate, and when I'm over in the Assembly, I end up making a compromise that I didn't feel like I had to give much. I just took it'll expire in 4 years if it's not renewed, but my view is it'll prove itself. That'll be a sunset, is what I took.
Right.
And then Marcus chaired the Judiciary Committee and presented it on the floor. So he sort of helped make sure with me that it got out of Judiciary, and then he moved it on the floor, and the governor signed it. Yeah, and it was, and he knew how important it was as well. And so
he's very quiet. Didn't want to be on that stage, right? Pretty quiet guy. Was a big dude.
Yes,
right?
he's
big,
tall.
foreboding dude. The chances of him coming on the show are, percentage-wise.
Oh,
Chances
can I guess?
I think
Stone
low, because right now he is so excited about being done.
Right.
I think you'll get him at some point.
I was gonna say 40%.
Yeah.
40%.
I don't think
Yeah.
I'm thinking
I think
20.
it'll go up over time.
Okay, yeah. No
Because
rush.
I think then he'll be ready to sort of be retrospective and talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe after he checks the ticket, right? Then it's
Yeah.
like no liability. Let's go. Let's talk about it.
No, I think.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think he was ready to be done. He could have had 2 more years, and his district changed dramatically, and he would have had to work really hard in new areas. And he knew he was getting ready to support Gail Pellerin for the seat in 2024, and so it worked really well. He knew that there was somebody there that was really good, that was going to take the mantle, that he was happy supporting, and he was ready to go. And I think the Assembly has been really chaotic the last year and the last few years. I used to resent, when I was in the Assembly, the fact that the Senate was snooty and the upper house and all this other stuff. And now I fight and fight and fight to keep from getting caught into the inner house stuff.
Right.
But they're really chaotic, and they just had this speakership fight that went on for a year.
Yeah.
And you weren't sure how certain things were going to work when you got them to the Assembly. And I think if you're somebody like Mark that's there for the right reasons, that's really tiring.
Yeah. You going to work tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow I'm going to work, and then I'm going to go away
Okay.
Saturday.
So what are you working on tomorrow?
I have I'm participating in a water conference remotely, and I'm
Worldwide water or local water?
California water.
Okay.
And I've got a Zoom with the Cal Poly president to talk about some of the Diablo issues and to try to make sure we're programming in the right way. I'm talking with somebody about UCSC and their housing thing, and I'm going. I have other things.
You have lunch?
Somewhere. but then also I'm going to go to Gail Pellerin's ceremonial swearing in as the last thing, and then we're going to drop from site.
Yay for Gail. Yay
Thanks,
for
John.
Gail.
This was fun. Thanks for having
Coming in
me.
the show.
John, seriously. Well, and again, anyone who's just listened, you have, I think, the community's interest.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to congratulate you for that.
For the hospital. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean,
That's cool.
And just everything you're doing makes sense. So I congratulate that.
Yeah.
For having the community's back, my back. Quick question. Number 1 for next year. Do you have one?
Not sure yet. I mean, because I think we're going to follow up on a lot of the climate electricity stuff. I introduced a bill in basic form on Monday about safety of battery storage, because there was an event in Moss Landing.
Oh, that's right.
And we need the battery storage, But we also need fire and safety standards and.
For the batteries.
Yeah,
Right.
and notification. And so I introduced a bill and I'm gonna move on that.
Yeah.
Will we see windmills ever out here?
No.
No?
This is the sanctuary.
Sanctuary won't have
Yeah.
windmills.
And even if we did have them here, they'd be way out
Yeah,
somewhere.
12
Right,
miles.
right, 20
Yeah,
miles out.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. John Laird, everybody, by the way,
Yes, and I don't
Thank
have
you.
to ask you to stay in touch, because you will.
Neil, what's coming up?
Next week, Dave Ebert.
Oh, the shark guy.
Shark guy.
Number one shark person on the planet.
Dave Ebert's gonna.
What is he named? Like 50 sharks?
He's named 50 species
He's named
that he
50
found.
species of shark.
Yeah.
Debunked the shark bracelet.
Yeah.
Debunked the sea snake wetsuit.
Yeah. Debunked everything.
Yeah, so if
He's
you have a
great guy.
question about sharks, Mr. Dave Ebert will debunk that immediately. So, John Laird, again, thank you so much for
My
being here.
pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate you. Appreciate you. T. Fox, thanks for having us. Neil,
Thanks, buddy.
great show. Good night, everybody.